Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lions Grid. It's Thursday night at 6 p.m., which means we're coming to you live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. I am joined today by Mr. Jeffrey Raymond and Mr. Joseph Wilmot. Gentlemen, how are you doing on this Thursday before Christmas?
Doing good.
Good.
Doing good. About to see some family, get together and celebrate the holidays, and it'll be fun this year, and I'm looking forward to it.
It certainly is shaping up to be a rather joyful Christmas for us Lions fans, as they have a chance here on Christmas Eve not only to secure a playoff position, but with a win or a tie, could very well win their first NFC North division title, their first division title since they won the NFC Central back in 1993. Us, those of us here that were born in 1990, the Lions have only won two division championships during our lifetime, and so this could be the third one and their first one since they became the NFC North. They used to be the Central there. And of course, the Packers and Tampa Bay this past week reenacted that old NFC Central rivalry with a battle between the Bays, and the Tampa Bay coming on top there. But as we talk about what happened here in Week 15, let's go ahead and start out the show like we usually do, gentlemen, and let's go ahead and grind the grid and take a look back at all of the spicy Week 15 action, including that Battle of the Bays. But of course, the week started out with a Thursday night football matchup that ended up costing Mr. Brandon Staley his starting coaching job, as the Las Vegas Raiders absolutely demolished the Los Angeles Chargers 63-21, jumping out to that big first half lead and never looking back. Then there were three Saturday games this past week. We started off with the Vikings at the Bengals, and the Bayou Bengals able to, well, I guess they're not the Bayou Bengals because they're not LSU. And they don't have Joe Burrow at starting quarterback, but Jake Browning able to lead the Bengals to a 27-24 win. And then we had the Steelers and the Colts were able to get a win there, 30-13. And then, of course, the primetime game on Saturday, our Detroit Lions against the Denver Broncos, getting that 42-17 win. Both you, Jeffrey, and Joe chose the Lions in this game, and they now improved to 9-0 when wearing matching uniforms, so good on you there. In the first game from the early games on Sunday, we had the Giants and the Saints get a 24-6 win. Then we had the Bears and the Browns and Joe Flacco stop any real push from the Bears for the playoffs. They're still technically not eliminated, but not looking good for the Bears' playoff chances. 20-17, the final score there for the Browns. Then the Panthers picking up another win on the season, beating their NFC South rival Falcons 9-7. Then the Battle of the Bays happened as the Buccaneers traveled up to Green Bay, and Baker Mayfield coming out on top with a 34-20 victory. Then we had an AFC East matchup. The Jets taking on the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill did not play in this game, but the Dolphins rolled anyways, 30-0. Then we had Kansas City going to Foxborough to take on the Patriots. 27-17 the final score there in favor of Kansas City. The Texans were able to take down the Titans in overtime, 19-16. Case Keenum getting the win there in place of the injured C.J. Stroud. The 49ers were able to put a 40-burger up against the Cardinals, winning that game 45-29. The Commanders went into L.A. to play the Rams, and the Rams were able to get another victory, 28-20 there. The Cowboys were taking on the Bills, and the Bills winning that game 31-10, making the NFC East race pretty spicy, and also helping out the Bills' playoff chances. The Ravens asserting dominance over the AFC, taking down the Jaguars 23-7. And then in a last-minute Drew Lock potential best play of his life, getting a 20-17 victory over the Eagles. The Eagles have now dropped 3 in a row, gentlemen, and that race between the Cowboys and the Eagles is a tight one, both sitting currently at 10-4. Cowboys currently in first place, but we'll talk about it here in a moment. A tougher road for the Cowboys than for the Eagles. So, lots happened that week. Of course, we're getting close to the end of the season. So these games, definitely the outcomes of them have a lot more impact on the playoffs because there's less margin for error at this point with only a few games remaining. Anything really surprise you, gentlemen, from this past week? Jeff, let's start with you on this one.
The Thursday night game, I was not looking forward to watching. I was like wondering if it's going to be one of the stale matchups that we've had because just Justin Herbert's out and the Raiders' offense is not very good. But we got ourselves a beautiful disaster because that was that. I find those kind of games entertaining when they're where just nothing's going right and it's just like an absolute. Mollywhopping, as the word was being thrown around last week. But yeah, sorry about that. It definitely took me off guard that the Chargers would be that susceptible to getting blown out like that.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like they quit on Brandon Staley there, and I know Richard Sherman throughout the broadcast was pretty adamant they should just fire him at halftime, and I wouldn't be surprised if they considered it because it was an ugly performance there. Joe, how about you? Anything from this past week of games that really surprised you?
I think Dallas was in a game where they were down big, and I think they lost. If I'm not incorrect about this, or if I'm
Mhm.
incorrect about this, correct me. But I can't remember who they were playing, but they just looked out of sync.
Yeah, they were up against the Bills, and so certainly an important game for both those teams. Of course, the Cowboys trying to hold on to the East and the number one seed in the NFC uh, in general, and then of course the Cowboys or sorry, the Bills are trying to make their run to the playoffs. So certainly a pretty important game for both those teams. But you're absolutely right. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. The Bills kind of exposed some weaknesses in the armor there. The Cowboys with that running game really leading the way. But before we jump into our buy or sell segment for the week, let's go ahead and take a look back here at that game with between the Broncos and the Lions. Of course, the Lions were able to get a 42-17 victory in this game. They improved to 10-4 on the year and now have a commanding 3-game lead in the NFC North with only 3 games remaining. As mentioned, all they need to do to claim the NFC North is either get a win or a tie in one of these 3 remaining games, and they're your NFC North champions. So definitely in control of their own destiny. It was nice to see Jared Goff sort of rebound here. He threw 5 touchdown passes in the game and led 6 touchdown drives. And the defense also had one of their best all-around performances. And the special teams making the switch from Riley Patterson to Mike Badgley didn't miss any extra points or anything like that. So really a nice all-around win for the Lions. Goff, his final stat lines was he went 24 of 34 for 278 yards and 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 134.6 passer rating. It was a season high for both the number of touchdown passes in the game and his QB rating there for Goff. And then, of course, it was only the 4th time this season that the top 5 offensive linemen were starting for the Lions. We had Frank Ragnow back from injury, and it made a huge difference in the running game. Both Gibbs and Montgomery, they combined for a total of 185 yards. Gibbs had 100 on 11 carries, including a 12-yard touchdown in the 4th quarter. And Montgomery had 85 yards on 17 carries. Gibbs also had 2 passes for 8 yards, including a 9-yard touchdown pass. So his other one was a negative play, but hey, he got a touchdown. So, and speaking of rookies catching touchdowns, we would of course, have to mention Sam Laporta. He caught 5 of 6 of his targets for 56 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. Now on the season, he is at 9 touchdowns, which not only is a record for rookie tight ends, but it is a record for any rookie position. And he is the only rookie tight end in NFL history to produce at least 70 receptions, 700 yards receiving, and 9 receiving touchdowns in a season. So Sam Laporta making some history there not only good for Lions history, but good in NFL history. So
Offensive Rookie of the Year.
I think he should be, but there's that QB bias. So I think C.J. Stroud, unfortunately, may get the nod, but I think he should be considered. I think he should be. And as mentioned, the Lions are now 9-0 when wearing matching jerseys and pants. We'll keep that stat updated because we talked about the moon's impact. There's definitely a correlation here between what they're wearing and the swag they show on the field. So
they got to keep going with it at this point. You can't break the cycle until we lose.
I need to start figuring out. They don't announce it until a game day or like the day before what their uniform combinations are going to be, what the kit's going to look like. I need them to do it before pick'em, so that way I know which way to go. Because I went with the Broncos in this game, and little did I know, the Broncos had been doing good. They were one of the best defenses. They'd only been giving up 16 points per game since they gave up that 70 burger to the Dolphins, and then the Lions exploded on them for 42 points. What were your gentlemen's thoughts about this game? Did the Lions perform up to expectations for you? And does it sort of, I know the last couple of weeks we were sort of feeling that maybe our expectations for what they could do in the postseason had changed. Does this have you re-energized about what the Lions may be able to do if they can sustain this through the last couple of weeks? Joe, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, a rush attack where both Gibbs and Montgomery were very effective, and a passing game where everybody was involved. Jared Goff, 0 interceptions, 5 touchdowns, decent yardage. That's the game I told everybody he needed to have. That's the game he went out there and he had. Basically that was a game against Denver that they needed to win. Now they're in position to clinch the division. You win this game, you win the Dallas game, you look where things are against Minnesota in the last week of the season, and you see if you could possibly get the number 1 seed and get a bye week and still have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Because it's easier to get 2 victories than it is to get 3 on the way to the Super Bowl. So I would say that, this was definitely a game that Detroit came out and they played a complete football game. I was not able to watch the football game, but with the scores and stats, I was able to see the production of it.
Yeah, what were your thoughts there, Jeffrey?
I think this was seeing us at what the height of our powers could be, especially on offense. This is the first time, really all year, that we've had all of our key pieces on the field at the same time, and especially on the offensive side of the ball. We had Gibbs, Goff, Ragnow was back, Jameson Williams getting involved finally. Like this was a coming out party for us as far as like our slump that we've been in, because we started out slow. We are losing to bad teams or not beating teams that we should. And Frank Ragnow has not allowed a sack he's allowed 1 sack since 2020, which is nuts.
Yeah, he is playing out of his mind, and really in general, the whole line is playing at a very high level. So I think this was certainly a important game. I think it sort of established a sort of to your point, Jeffrey, that ideal scenario that we want for this offense moving forward. If we can sort of recreate the success and that we had this week moving forward, it's definitely the sort of that path to victory that the Lions offense is going to look to maintain. Hey there, Nick. Glad to have you here with us as we're talking about the thrilling victory for the Lions over the Broncos. It's funny, when everything was going good for the Broncos, people started to talk about how everything seemed to be getting better in Denver. The relationship between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. They were starting that Sean Payton had finally reached Russell Wilson. Now, after that loss, you're hearing about more and more about him getting yelled at on the sidelines and just that being a toxic relationship. So it's amazing the difference 1 week can make, because the Broncos were definitely surging. They're still very much in the mix for the AFC playoffs, and we'll look at that playoff picture here in just a few moments. But certainly it was a if you're the Broncos, it wasn't a must-win game, but it definitely hurt their playoff hopes, losing to the Lions. And of course, for us fans of Detroit, San Francisco is currently in the number one seed for the NFC, but they do have a game this week against Baltimore. There certainly is a chance for us, if we can win out the remainder of our games, to be in that conversation for the number one seed. And that, as mentioned earlier during the show, this is only going to be our third potential division title of our lifetime, gentlemen. It's crazy that not only are we talking about getting an NFC North title, but also potentially competing for a number one seed. That would be one heck of a Christmas present for all Detroit fans. And we'll have to see what Santa brings us come Christmas Day. So before we take a look ahead to our game this weekend against Minnesota, of course, this is one of our two games against them here in the final three games. Let's go ahead and talk about our champs and chumps from this past week. I'll start out with my picks here. I went with the Buccaneers quarterback Baker Mayfield as my champ for this week. Baker Mayfield is the first visiting QB ever to have a perfect passer rating. That's 158.3 at Lambeau Field. Tampa Bay needed him to have his best game of the season, and he delivered not only his best game of the season, but one of the best games of his career. So I got to give Baker Mayfield credit where credit is due. He played very well. And then my chump for this week is Steelers safety Damontae Kazee. He is the safety who is now suspended the remainder of the season after he had a very much the type of hit that you don't want to see in football anymore, as he hit Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. It was surprisingly, usually the broadcast won't show replays of hits. Usually if it's like the injury is like a fracture or something like that, they don't want to, or like people's legs bend in poor directions. This was actually one of those hits where it was a head-to-head hit, but they weren't showing replays of it just because this was a pretty egregious hit by Kazee there on Pittman Jr. Definitely, I think, the type of thing that the NFL wants to get removed from the game. And certainly, I don't think he's necessarily a dirty player, but that was definitely the type of hit that could not only jeopardize someone's playing in the game, but could impact his ability, his career. That was a pretty substantial shot he put on him. So that's my chump, because I don't think there is. You always want to play hard, but you never really want to hurt somebody, and that it definitely seemed like the intent there was to make Michael Pittman remember him there. So that's my chump pick.
He's gotten in trouble before. I think that's why the suspension was quite hefty.
Yeah, this is not his first run in with questionable hits. So he found himself here with a year-long suspension. So hopefully he can get things figured out. And I definitely don't want to see his career get ended either. But you definitely have to be a little more careful out there and a little more conscientious of how you're hitting your fellow NFL players, because that was a scary hit he put on it. Jeffrey, who do you got this week for your champ and chump?
My champ is Jared Goff. After a few weeks of shaky play, he kind of came out there and dominated, ran that offense exactly how it should be. And we were talking last week that we felt like he was a little bit rattled. He was like not himself, feeling pressure and not throwing the ball well. But this week he looked back to form, so he's my champ. My chump is Steelers wide receiver George Pickens. If you don't know, he's been a few weeks now seen giving up on plays and not really being engaged with the offense. He made a comment to the media this week about not giving all the effort, and his teammates are kind of getting a little annoyed with him and his lack of buying in, which I know their offense has been bad, but like if you're on the team, you can't be letting people down by not run blocking for them, giving up on plays. But I believe they had a team meeting to discuss him this week, but he's my chump. He's just not good vibes coming out of the Steelers locker room.
I know Mike Tomlin had some pretty spicy things to say about him in an interview. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, definitely another one of those Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell situations there in Pittsburgh. Joe, who do you have this week as your champ, and who do you have as your chump?
My jump is Fox 66 because they played basketball in a local market in Michigan when they should have had the Lions game, and I didn't get to watch. So
Dang
Fox
right.
66 on antenna is my chump, and my champ is Spectrum. They got me hooked up with TV service, so now I can watch football again.
Very nice. Yeah, that is disappointing when they're supposed to have the local game on and they don't deliver. So glad to hear that. Especially with how exciting the end of the season should be, it'll be nice to be able to see how things unfold for the Lions because we're actually playing meaningful football at the end of the year. It's exciting stuff. All right, gentlemen, let's jump now into our buy or sell segment. We'll take a look at some trending topics from around the NFL and expand upon, sort of what we did when we were grinding the grid. First up here, for your consideration, we have our first of two questions about the Buffalo Bills, or I guess two statements about the Bills. This first one being the Bills are back and should be considered contenders in the AFC. Obviously, they're coming off the victory against the Cowboys, winning that game 31-10. Joe, what are your thoughts about the Bills? Do you think they have what it takes to compete in the AFC playoffs?
The announcer said nobody wants to go to Buffalo and play the Bills if the Bills have home field advantage. And that's true, but I mean, if the Bills get in, they're not going to have home field advantage. They're going to be going on the road. But even then, the Bills are still a tough team. They got players in every position that can make plays, and they have a solid defense. They're a competitor in the playoffs and have just as right as a chance to make it to the Super Bowl as anybody else that gets into the playoffs. So, yes, they are a contender. That's a buy.
Buying there from Joe. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here? Buying or selling?
I'm also buying this. I know they have not been playing really as well as they could be this year, but if you can string a few wins together, because they're on the bubble, I think they're the ninth seed right now. They could potentially get in and make some noise in the playoffs. I do agree with Joe. Their home field advantages would be a strength, but if they're kind of getting into kind of those lower seeded playoffs, they're definitely going to be on the road. And I don't know if they have that kind of team to go in there and win a couple games in the playoffs this year, but I think anybody who makes it in should be considered a contender at that point.
Yeah, the big thing is making the dance. So as long as they get in, of course, they have a chance. And I think too, they're starting to really that offense seems to be gelling a little bit under Joe Brady. Of course, they made the offensive coordinator switch. We'll memorialize Ken Dorsey when we take a look at our hot butt section. But it seems like things have, unlike Pittsburgh, where getting rid of Matt Canada didn't seem to fix things. The switch with offensive coordinator in Buffalo seems to be paying off. So, if they can make it to the playoffs, and it's definitely an if because the remaining games this season is thankfully not too difficult. They have a game against the Chargers. They have a game against the Patriots. Both games they should win. Of course, when you're playing the Patriots and you're the Bills, it's never a gimme. So they have to take that into consideration. And then they finish the season against the Dolphins. So, definitely have a chance, but they definitely need to get some wins here these final 3 weeks. But even if they don't make the playoffs, gentlemen, are you buying or selling the fact that the Bills showed the blueprint for how to beat Dallas, leaning on that running game like they did? Jeff, are you buying or selling?
I am buying this. I think defenses, especially this year, aren't loading the box up and playing the run as heavily. Like there's very much an emphasis on stopping the big plays, stopping the pass plays, and good old school downfield running is working for some of these teams, like the Ravens, us especially with our power zone that we run. The 49ers who generate a lot of rush yards. But I think for beating Dallas, as good as they are, their one weakness is their run defense. So I think it can happen to a lot of teams, but I think Dallas might be susceptible to it. I am buying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure too. I know Zach Martin got hurt in that game. We talked obviously about the importance that Frank Ragnow plays on the Lions' offensive line. Zach Martin is another one of the premier offensive linemen in the NFL. It's not as easy as replacing him as it is some other guys. So, if he has to miss sustainable time, their weakness for the running game and missing Zach Martin could definitely bode ill for the Cowboys. But Joe, are you buying this as well? Do you think the Bills showed Detroit how they can potentially beat Dallas in a couple of weeks?
Well, I think that it's the same blueprint on how to beat the Detroit Lions. You put up points early and you shut them down early, and then all of a sudden, they're down by 2 scores and they're climbing a mountain, and they make one mistake, the game's over with. Detroit's been getting out to these big leads, but anytime Detroit gets down by a few scores, like we saw against Green Bay on Thanksgiving, like we saw against the Ravens, and they haven't been able to come back in those football games. Even the Bears, the Bears get out to a big lead, and Detroit, is not able to form a comeback. If Detroit wants to compete in the playoffs, they're going to have to be able to withstand the initial adversity coming to them from the other team, and fight to keep it even or to not get blown out in the first half. And if they do, they have to be able to shut down on defense and come back. Detroit's a dangerous team to root for to make it to the Super Bowl, because they have a lot of ways that they can be beat, and so does Dallas. So the blueprint on how to beat Dallas was really a blueprint on how to beat the Detroit Lions as well. So Buffalo really set the standard for what Detroit's going to do come Dallas-Detroit in a week or two.
Yeah, and Ed's buying here too. He's buying, thinking that the Lions' run game and controlling the ball should give him a decent shot against the Cowboys. And I agree. After seeing how the Bills were able to be successful against the Cowboys, I definitely feel better about the Lions' chances here. The good news is we'll get to see it play out here, not this week, but next week. So exciting! That's going to be a pretty spicy matchup when the Lions do travel down to Dallas. Looking forward to that game. That should be pretty good. Next up here, gentlemen, sticking in the AFC East, question here regarding the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is having a fantastic year. I don't think he's going to break that 2,000-yard receiving just because he missed last week, and he's looking questionable this week. But with him on the Dolphins, Jalen Waddle gets overshadowed, but Jalen Waddle himself, gentlemen, I think he's a number one wide receiver. What are your thoughts here? Do you think that Jalen Waddle gets overshadowed by Tyreek Hill and is actually a number one wide receiver himself? Joe, what do you think?
I think Jalen Waddle is a possession receiver, and I think Tyreek Hill is a speed slash deep threat, mid-range, can play the slot. So he's really a 1 and a 3. Waddle plays the number 2 or the number 1 possession receiver. So I think that Tyreek's fame is going to overshadow Jalen Waddle, but they're both very effective to play the position, and gives Miami a solid 1-2 punch.
Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think he would be a wide receiver 1 on any team. I know he's going against the other side is the best wide receiver that's playing the game right now. But I think Miami is kind of blessed here with having these two weapons on their team. I mean, look at their offense. They've been running through when Jalen Waddle is not having a great game. Tyreek's usually running free. When Tyreek went out, Jalen Waddle steps up. I'm with Joe. It's a great 1-2 punch that they got there.
Yeah, it is a great problem to have. It's like having Chris Carter and Randy Moss, or Randy Moss and Wes Welker. Anytime you've had those two really, Troy Holt and Isaac Bruce. Anytime you can have two really great wide receivers on your team, definitely is a good problem to have. And Edward's going to join us here. He's going to buy, and of course he's thinking the Waddle dance is what pushes him over the edge there. I remember they were showing on the NFL Red Zone the Dolphins owner doing the Waddle after Jalen Waddle scored against the Jets. So It's
I don't think
it's
America will be able to unsee that.
it's getting pretty iconic when the owner starts doing it. One last question here for the AFC East, gentlemen. And this one statement is that missing the playoffs is the final straw for Robert Saleh and or Joe Douglas, their GM for the Jets. They're keeping or they activated Aaron Rodgers so that he can practice, but he will not be playing at any point in the season. They were trying to hold out and maybe stay in playoff contention. They've officially been eliminated from the playoffs. What are your thoughts here, Jeffrey? Are you buying or selling the fact that this may be the seat underneath Robert Saleh and the GM Joe Douglas may have started to get a little too hot for comfort?
Yeah, I think Joe Douglas's is actually hotter than Robert Saleh. The fact that their self scouting was that Zach Williams would be a good backup quarterback if in case Aaron Rodgers went down. Obviously, they weren't expecting Aaron Rodgers to go down in the first couple drives of the season, but they had all the time before free agency to kind of address it. They're wasting an all-time defense almost here with what they could potentially do. I think Robert Saleh will get some grace for having the Aaron Rodgers injury, but Joe Douglas, who's putting this team together to try to compete, at least be somewhat competitive, I think he's been doing a terrible job. He whiffed on Zach Wilson, but so I could see Joe Douglas being gone and maybe the new guy keeping Robert Saleh, but I definitely think Joe Douglas is way hotter than Robert Saleh's right now.
Joe, what are your thoughts here?
I agree with that. He says, sell. I feel like another year with Rodgers out for the season, sell. And I agree with this because I think that it's not the fault of the GM and the coach that Rodgers went down. They invested a lot of money in him as quarterback, and they had a team around him that was going to be competitive. You lost the quarterback, you lost the will of the team, you lost the whole entire season. It's not like you can recover from all the hype that you have for getting this new Hall of Fame quarterback and then putting in Zach Wilson and being like, well, we're only a few games behind 500, so if we miss the playoffs, you're done and out. I don't think that's the case. I think they've done a good job at competing with what they've had this year. So I think, that they'll get another year with Rodgers at the quarterback position and see how that goes next year.
Yeah, I think what'll be key if they do get a shot next year is definitely going to be addressing that offensive line. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers getting hurt he was under pressure and took that hit. And before he got hurt, he had been, it had come out into the press that he was unhappy about certain schemes and what it was requiring the offensive line to do and things like that. So, hopefully if they do stick around, they can address that offensive line. Definitely added Robert Saleh to the our hot butts list just because if you take a look on any ESPN, The Athletic, Sports Illustrated, CBS, any of the sports stuff right now, Robert Saleh's name is definitely coming up. So, it's funny. He was definitely a coach that everyone was really excited about just a couple of years ago when he was the defensive coordinator for San Francisco, and everyone was very, very curious about where he would go and how that's just changed over the course of the last couple of years. It can be a fickle thing. It'll be interesting to see if he does get a chance to have another year at the helm for the Jets, if he can turn it around, or if he just may be another one of those coaches that is a better coordinator than a head coach. Certainly, you look at there's been a couple of guys, but Jim Schwartz I think is a great example. He's gone ever since he was the head coach of the Lions. When he was with Philadelphia, their defense was really good. Of course, now he's with Cleveland, their defense is really good. So it may be one of those things where Saleh is just better suited as the defensive coordinator, but I hope he gets another year to figure it out. But I know there's definitely now, at least from a media perspective, he's been put on notice, so we'll have to see how that plays out. Moving on here to the AFC North, Jake Browning has filled in nicely with Joe Burrow out. He had his own sort of Kirk Cousins moment this past weekend as they took on the Vikings, saying, quote, "They never should have effing cut me about the Vikings." Gentlemen, do you think that Jake Browning, if he can continue to play at the level he has these last couple of weeks, do you think that he could find his way as a starting QB in the NFL? Joe, let's start with you here. Are you buying or selling the fact that Jake Browning may have what it takes to be a starting QB?
No, I don't think so. I think he's, the Vikings have had difficulty ever since Kirk Cousins went down. But, I think that's inconsistency. It's unstable. A double minded person is unstable in all that they do. And that's the philosophy that's going into the quarterback position of the Minnesota Vikings. So they're going to put him in there. He's going to play football. And, he's got a 3-game trial to see how he does. And, I'm not giving him a starting quarterback position right now to see, like in the NFL, like he's got to earn that position. So, sell.
Joe selling on this one. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here about the Bengals QB?
I am buying this. I think he's done really well in Joe Burrow's place. There's been a lot of injuries at quarterbacks, and I think he's better than like a third of the starting quarterbacks currently. At least from I think he's better than Bryce Young. Bryce Young hasn't developed yet. I think he's better than Desmond Ridder for sure. I think him and Baker might be on the on the kind of the same level there. But I think he's more than serviceable as a backup, and I think teams would give him a chance based on what he's put forward.
Yeah, I think a lot will depend, what happens here in the draft and in the offseason. I know there's a lot of excitement about Caleb Williams and Drake Mays, and you got JJ McCarthy coming out. So there's definitely a good QB pool coming out this year. But if you are one of those teams that is in need of a QB and you, for whatever reason, don't acquire one through the draft, if you're not going after Kirk Cousins, Jake Browning could be a more affordable option for some of those teams that are looking for a QB. Certainly has if he can get I think a lot will depend too if he can get the Bengals here to the playoffs. Right now he's definitely proven to be a solid backup, as Edward and Joe point out. But it's going to be one of those things where if he can get that end result of getting them into the playoffs, I think that might help sway some teams, get him some chances down the road. But yeah, I think definitely Cincinnati as a team has been playing rather well, to Edward's point there, and has certainly helped lift him up. It's not been a solo effort by any means. Jake Browning hasn't been carrying the load. Moving down to the AFC South here, gentlemen. Right now, the Jaguars hold first place. They're on a 3-game losing streak and currently have a 57% chance to win the division. But are you buying or selling the fact that either the Texans or the Colts will be able to win the AFC South instead of the Jaguars? Both of those teams are currently sitting at 8-6. All 3 teams are currently sitting at 8-6 with 3 games remaining. Do you think either the Texans or the Colts will end up on top instead of the Jaguars? Jeffrey, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. There's a lot of teams in the hunt in the AFC currently. The Colts are one of them. I think the Colts are kind of spicy. I think Minshew's been doing a decent job keeping that team afloat, playing well in some games here. But yeah, I think that Jacksonville is kind of falling apart, especially compared to expectations and people who thought that Trevor Lawrence would kind of take that leap this year. But he does have, I think he has the most turnovers of the starting quarterbacks that kind of picked up in his situation. So I could see them losing for sure.
Well, if it sways you at all, the next 3 opponents for the Jaguars are the Buccaneers, the Panthers, and the Titans. The Texans, their next 3 games are against the Browns, the Titans, and the Colts. And then the Colts' next 3 games are against the Falcons, the Raiders, and the Texans. So I'm not sure if their remaining schedules skews this at all for you. But the Texans and the Colts will face off the last week of the season. And then No, I mean outside of the Texans um, playing the Browns, it's pretty easy schedule for all three teams there to end the season. Joe, what are your thoughts here? Do you think the Texans or the Colts have enough in the gas tank to catch the Jaguars?
No, I think the Jaguars have an elite quarterback, quarterback that's got control of his football team, and I think he's a leader, and I think he's going to be able to get them into the playoffs and win the division, get a home field playoff game. The only threat to it, I don't see the Texans. I see them losing 2 games. I see the Colts winning 2 games. So, I mean, if it depends on Jacksonville and Colts, and I think the edge is going to go to Jacksonville because the Colts' second win that I'm predicting, is a 50-50. So they could lose that one as well. So I think Jacksonville takes it, winning at least 2 out of 3 down the stretch.
Yeah, definitely. Also, something to take into consideration is that C.J. Stroud for the Texans is questionable for this week too against the Browns. So this is you could see a Case Keenum Joe Flacco matchup this weekend, and that could certainly impact the outcome there for the Texans as far as they're concerned. And then Edward thinking the Jags are in a slump, but they'll end up taking the division, liking that favorable schedule with their 3 remaining games there to help being that deciding factor. Moving on here, sticking in the AFC, though, gentlemen, we talked a little bit about what's going on with George Pickens during Jeffrey's champ or chump selection, but right now the Pittsburgh Steelers are in a free fall. Are you buying or selling the statement? Right now, they are currently at 7-7 on the season, and currently the 10th seed in the AFC. But with not rumor, they are starting Mason Rudolph this week at QB after struggling on offense. They're taking on the Bengals. Do you think that the Steelers are in a free fall here and will miss the playoffs? Joe, you buying or selling this one?
Yeah, I don't like the Pittsburgh Steelers. No, they missed the playoffs this year.
Yeah, they're 3 remaining games in their season. They're at home this weekend against the Bengals. Then they're traveling to Seattle to take on the Seahawks, and then they finish the season on the road against Baltimore. So
they may win one more game, but that's it, and they're not making the playoffs.
What are your thoughts here, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think Mike Tomlin's streak of winning seasons is in serious jeopardy here. I don't think they'll make the playoffs. I think they have bad vibes all around, and I think they're just better teams that'll have a better end of the schedule here, and I can see them dropping 2 or even 3 of these games. So I am definitely buying that they are free falling.
Yeah, it is not a good look for a team that has. I mean, their defense is playing rather well, but just that offense definitely is not got it together. And I haven't seen anything to suggest that over the last 3 weeks they'll be able to magically figure it out. So I think all of us here are in agreement. We're going to buy this one, and Steelers are going to have to look for better days in 2024 because they're not coming here this year. Taking a look now, changing our focusing now to the NFC. Taking a look down in the South. Well, currently Tampa Bay is your current NFC South leader. Do you buying or selling the fact that Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will win the NFC South? At 7-7, you also have New Orleans at 7-7, and then you also have Atlanta at 6-8. So all 3 teams still mathematically in the race. What are your thoughts here, Jeffrey? Do you think Tampa Bay takes it?
I do think they'll take the division. I think they're the best team in that horrible division. They've got at least a little bit of spice to them. I don't get that same feeling from definitely the Panthers. And the Falcons just confused me. Arthur Smith is a football terrorist. I don't see them doing well with Desmond Ridder. Baker is, I think, the best quarterback in this division at this current point. Bryce Young hasn't developed yet, and I think they are gonna take this. And Todd Bowles, I think he's gonna save his job.
Yeah, it is. When you take a look at their remaining schedule, there is some spiciness left in the season for Tampa Bay. Of course, Tampa Bay this week is playing Jacksonville, so not an easy game there. Then they play the Saints in Week 16. Wait, is that week? Yeah, no. Is that Week 16? No, we're in Week 16. Week 17. I'm sorry, there's 18 weeks now. So in Week 17, they're playing the Saints, and then they finish out the season against the Panthers. The Saints also do not have an easy road. Of course, they're playing Tampa Bay, but this today, Thursday night, they're in a important game against the Rams, and then they finish the season against the Falcons. And then the Falcons may have the easiest schedule, but still not super easy because they're playing the Saints the last week of the season. They're playing the Colts this weekend, and then they get the Bears. And depending on which Bears team shows up, which Falcons team shows up, who knows how that could shake out. Joe, what are your thoughts here? Do you think Tampa Bay will be sitting on the throne down in the NFC at the end of the year?
No, I think New Orleans loses tonight to the Rams, and I think they win the next two games. Won a game against the Buccaneers, and I think that gives them the edge in the division, which is going to give them the home field game in the division. So I would have to say that I think the division is going to go to the New Orleans Saints, or at least I hope it does. You got to root for the Saints anytime you can.
Unfortunately for both of these two teams, whoever does win this division will likely be seeing either Dallas or Philadelphia come playoff time, because they will be the NFC South will be the number 4 seed. So whoever doesn't end up winning the NFC East will be making that trip to the NFC South victors. So even if they get, I mean, obviously it's important to get in, but the level of competition they'll be facing is going to be pretty big. And we have Edward here, the winner of the Saints New Orleans game is the winner. I'll take so when I think Edward meaning here the game against Tampa Bay. Whoever ends up winning that game next week should be your champion, which I think both teams will enjoy having the fact that they can sort of settle it on the field and not have to leave things up to chance. Talking about the NFC East and winners and losers here, gentlemen. Despite losing the last 3 games, the Philadelphia Eagles will win the NFC East. Again, taking a look at both teams' remaining schedules, the last 3 games for Philadelphia are against the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Giants. Whereas if we look at Dallas, their last 3 games are against Miami, Detroit, and the Commanders. Both teams are currently sitting at 10-4. Joe, what are your thoughts here? Do you think the Eagles will be able to outlast Dallas and claim the NFC East title?
Yes, Philadelphia is going to win the NFC East. I think Dallas loses 1, maybe 2 more games. Toss up between Detroit and Dallas, but yeah, I think Philadelphia either wins out or they just lose 1 more game, but they clinch the division.
Very nice. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think Philly's still going to take this. I'm going to be probably drinking the Kool-Aid when we go into Dallas. Spoiler alert for next time. And, you know, I think they lose the division by a game. I'm going with Philly.
Yeah, unless there's some like huge injury for us this week against the Vikings, which I definitely don't want to happen. I went against the Kool-Aid when I picked with the Broncos, so I mean I think I'm gonna be all in when it comes to that Detroit Dallas game, especially if our offensive line is healthy. And so considering again just the strength of schedule, and I don't even think Tommy Cutlets. I know he's in the concussion protocol. It's at that point we're talking 3rd string Giants quarterback. You got to think if there's. I mean, I know Philadelphia's been hurt in the last 3 weeks, but if there was ever a schedule to get right against, having the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Giants makes that's a pretty good recipe for what ails you. So I do think Philadelphia too will end up being the NFC East champions. And Edward here agrees with us and thinking potentially if not, he's thinking that it'll be a potential early exit in the playoffs. And I could, even if they do get in and do end up winning the NFC East, again, since they are playing such a weak schedule, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if it is either early game exit. If it's a 1 or 2 game exit for Philadelphia, regardless, because they aren't looking the sturdiest up there, even though they're still in contention. And now, gentlemen, taking a look at a potential postseason award here. Of course, as mentioned, the 49ers hung 45 points against the Cardinals this past weekend. And even though he thinks his fellow teammate Christian McCaffrey should win the award, Brock Purdy is now the favorite according to the betting FanDuel to win the MVP award. He's currently minus 200, and according to ESPN, has a 67% chance of winning the league MVP award. Gentlemen, do you think that the 49ers QB will be the MVP at the end of the season? Of course, Lamar Jackson is definitely there, and we're actually going to see the 49ers and Baltimore square off, so that could be a big deciding factor in this, depending on how both QBs play. But we've seen some of the other QBs who were sort of there at the top. Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott. These especially last week for Dak, he sort of shat the bed a little bit there and kind of fumbled. So you think it's all sort of wide open now for Brock Purdy? Jeffrey, let's start with you.
I think it's a two-man race right now. I think it's Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson. I think Christian McCaffrey should be the second person there, but it's such a biased awards towards quarterback, so I think it's going to end up being a quarterback battle. But Dak played himself out last week. Jalen had played himself out last week. I think if they would have won, he could have stayed on there. But yeah, I think Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson are going to be vying for the top here, but Brock Purdy, I mean, for being Mr. Irrelevant, he's playing his way to an MVP season in his first full season here.
Joe, what are your thoughts here about Brock Purdy?
I'd like to see him win the award because he went under the radar. He hasn't been a very popular name other than in San Francisco, and playing the game and able to put up good numbers and play well throughout the course of the season. He wins the MVP. I see that kind of as the achievement of the season. If he wins the MVP, I don't see them winning the Super Bowl. I would see them maybe winning a game in the playoffs, but that's it, because I think the achievement alone is going to complete the season for Brock Purdy if he does win the MVP. After you achieve something, some of your drive kind of diminishes a little bit. So I'd have to say, there's always that drive, like Tom Brady, to win more Super Bowls. But it's like, how many Super Bowls did Brady win when he won the MVP? We don't know that stat off the top of our heads, but after you win an award, it's like it's hard to keep going and complete the task. I think there's only been 1 or 2 quarterbacks or people in history that have won both regular season and Super Bowl MVP. So I don't know how many teams from regular season MVPs have won the Super Bowl, but that number is probably not as high as it should be. So I think he could win the MVP. But, if it goes to Lamar Jackson, then, yeah, the San Francisco 49ers will be more of a threat.
Yeah, I think it's, like I previewed there, I think a big thing will be this Baltimore-San Francisco game, because I do think Lamar Jackson, and, again, we've talked about that QB bias. I do think Christian McCaffrey should be someone who's considered, because he's almost got the 2,000 yards rushing and over 20 touchdowns. But again, just with QB bias, I think Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson are probably your two lead guys. So, yeah, this game this weekend will be important for deciding this MVP race. And Edward, he is buying here, likes the story, thinks Purdy is a great quarterback, and then also want us to take a moment to recognize a new follower we have here in the Los Angeles area. We will be talking a little bit more here about the Lions, getting a little more Lions specific, and coming in guaranteeing the Lions winning the division this Sunday. Pretty spicy. pretty spicy. Um, so before we talk about the Lions, just one more general NFL topic here, gentlemen, and it's about the NFC West Seattle Seahawks. Of course, they were able to hang on and beat the Eagles this past weekend, and it made a huge difference in their chances as ESPN calculates it for the playoffs. Coming into that game, they had a 32% chance of making the playoffs. And after they upset the Eagles, that number jumped all the way up to 55%. Do you gentlemen think that Drew Lock was able to save the Seahawks season and get them a spot in the playoffs by having that comeback win against the Eagles? Joe, what are your thoughts here? Do you think that the Seahawks can make it to the playoffs?
Yeah, I have probably like 3 or 4 Drew Lock football cards from when he was in college, when he was in Denver. It's like I was opening packs of football cards a few years ago, and all they kept giving me were these Drew Lock cards. And it's like, okay, I get it. Is he going to be a good quarterback or not? So it's like hopefully he gets them in the playoffs with Seattle. And those cards are like, okay, well, they're now vintage classics, So, yeah, Drew Lock, for Seattle, he was hyped up coming out of college, so hopefully he gets them in the playoffs. Yeah, I think he could get them in the playoffs. Bye.
Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm buying this. He definitely saved their season, and he played really good football. He didn't do too much as far as like the first two-thirds of the game, but then when it came down to it, the defense kind of kept him in there, and he was able to go down the field and score that drive in the waning minutes of the fourth quarter. And I think with them, I think as far as them being in the hunt, they are the 8th seed currently. But behind them would be the Saints, Falcons, the Packers, and I think the Seahawks have a way better team than those guys behind them. I think they finish out, and Drew Lock is going to turn Joe into a millionaire with all of those football cards that are about to go up in value.
Yeah, I'll wait 50 years and then sell them.
Well, the only thing that may hurt that value is I do think Geno Smith is almost coming back from his groin injury. So I'm not sure if it'll be this week or if it'll be next week. But definitely Drew Lock, I think he's given him a chance. And I think the Lions may become the Seahawks' best friends because of the fact that, as Jeffrey mentioned, and we'll take a look at the playoff picture, they are currently the 8th seed in the NFC. So they're just outside of that wild card spot. And with us playing the Vikings twice in the remaining 3 games, if we can deal them 2 losses, certainly helps the Seahawks' chances of making the playoffs. And the Seahawks' remaining schedule is pretty favorable. They're at Tennessee, then they're home against the Steelers, and then they're at Arizona. So, 2 of those 3 teams have losing records, and we already talked about the Steelers being in free fall. So, they need a little help to make the postseason. But Drew Lock certainly came through and gave them a chance with that win over the Eagles. So we'll have to see if the Seahawks can capitalize on it or not. Now taking a focus back to our Detroit Lions here, gentlemen. Do you think that this weekend proved that the Lions offense in particular has gotten its swagger back after getting derailed there the last couple of weeks against the Packers and the Bears? Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here? You buying or selling?
I'm buying this, absolutely. We've been playing bad football for the past 3 weeks, but we were healthy. Our run game was clicking. The pass game was clicking. Our rookies were all on the field together, destroying people. I think, and spoiler alert, I think they have the best line in the NFL too for our next topic. But everybody was on the field for the first time. All of our number ones in that depth chart, and it was awesome to see us kind of at that like beginning of the season form where we were dominating.
Joe, what are your thoughts here? Buying or selling that the Lions got that swagger back on offense?
Yeah, they played their best offensive football game, I think, throughout the entire season on the Saturday night game against Denver. And I think what we need to see with them coming up this weekend is another solid output. They don't have to put up 40 points, but maybe mid-30s, and play solid defense, against Minnesota, who's challenging them for the division. It needs to be another consistent We may say they got their swag back. That's guaranteed because that's what we saw against Denver. But it's like, is it truly back? Is it going to be here for this game? Maybe a letdown against Dallas and finishing out the season strong. I don't know. Or maybe it's here for 2 games and then rest your starters against Minnesota last week. I don't know. It's promising, but nothing is for certain, and we cannot make predictions as in, oh, it's back, and then have them go out and play like they did against Green Bay or Chicago. This is another divisional matchup. They got 2 games in 3 weeks against them, so they're gonna have to either split or win this one on Sunday and win the division.
You bring up a great point, Joe. I talked about when we were talking about what happened between Detroit and Denver, that Denver was the second best scoring defense in the league, giving up 16 points per game. Coming into last week, Minnesota was the number one scoring defense in the league, only giving up 14 points per game. They ended up giving up 27 to the Bengals. But it's very similar to last week, where we're playing up against a defense that doesn't give up a lot of points. So it will be interesting to see if the offense can carry that momentum against another defense. And certainly, if they can do that in back-to-back weeks against 2 very good defenses that don't like to give up a lot of points, I certainly will be feeling really good about the Lions' chances as they head into the playoffs, especially as Jeff mentioned, after they struggled those last 3 weeks prior to this victory. If you can turn it around from going from struggling to scoring points against defenses that don't like to give them up, certainly can change your opinion rather quickly. And Edwards here buying with us as well, hoping that it will carry over here into the Minnesota game. And yeah, we're going to need it because, again, Minnesota's defense does not give up a lot of points. And then before we finish up as we finish up the buy or sell segment here, gentlemen, this week 16, of course, as you get closer to the playoffs, every game seems to have increased value, but there are a lot of spicy matchups this week that can certainly impact the playoff picture. Do you think that week 16, are you buying or selling that this has some of the best matchups we've seen so far this season? Some of the ones that I'm highlighting here are the Thursday night football matchup, tonight's game between the Saints and the Rams. You have Indy versus Atlanta, really more important for Indy than it is for Atlanta. You have Cleveland and Houston, which can be a big game for the AFC playoffs. Of course, you have us at Minnesota, Cincinnati at Pittsburgh, Miami versus the Dolphins, and maybe the spiciest game of the season, the current number 1 AFC seed versus the number 1 NFC seed, Baltimore versus San Francisco. Joe, what are your thoughts here? Do you think week 16 gives us the best game so far of the season?
Yeah, it'll be a testament to all these different teams about their competitive play style, because most of these teams in here are competing for positioning in playoffs or for a playoff spot. So I mean, all the games matter in this bracket that we have up here, and it'll just be fun to see how these teams play college football. And in some ways, the playoffs start this week, for some teams, so, it's all, every game matters, week 1 through week 16, you got to get those victories. It's a short season. And, now that there's only 3 games left in the season, these games are critical and clutch, and every play, every touchdown, everything matters in them. It's time to take things seriously and play fundamentally sound football and get back to basics, to where teams can go out and compete competitively and produce quality football for what they want to represent for their season of football for that team.
Yeah, very well said there, Joe. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think as far as the on-paper matchups are concerned, this is one of the few weeks where I've been like, oh, all these games I'm into. Though with all the parity that's going on every week has been pretty exciting. I've been having a good time with this NFL season as far as, I guess, the storylines, which teams are competitive, which are a lot of teams. There's only 4 teams eliminated, only 4 or 6 teams eliminated from the playoffs at this point. I think it's 6. But the Bears, heck, they have had 1% chance of making it in there for some reason. But I think it's been a fun football year, and this week's going to be like Joe said, it's going to be kind of the playoffs starting for some of these teams because there's a lot of people who are very close to each other in the standings.
Well, it's good that you mentioned the playoff picture because that's where we're going to turn our attention now, Jeffrey. We'll take a look here. Of course, this is the people that are currently in. The Ravens currently the number 1 seed, as mentioned in the AFC. Your Dolphins are your number 2 seed. Kansas City hanging on to 3, and Jacksonville is currently your 4 seed. And then our 3 wild card teams, you have the Browns, the Bengals, and the Colts. Taking a look over on the NFC side of things, the Niners hold the number 1 seed, the Cowboys, the Lions, Tampa Bay, Philadelphia, the Vikings, and the Rams. And we'll start with the NFC playoff picture, looking at who is on the bubble here. Of course, right here is where we're looking the 6, 7, 8, 9 spot. You can see there are, and of course, technically, the Packers, the Giants, and Chicago are still not eliminated. You can see only Washington, Arizona, and Carolina have been eliminated on the NFC side of the bracket. But really, these 4 teams right here is where a lot of the focus is going to be. Of course, with the NFC South in particular, it still keeps the Falcons in play because, at 7-7, 6-8, 7-7 here with the other 2 teams, that NFC South is still very much in contention. And then if we switch over to the AFC side, there's still a logjam going on here as well. Again, taking a look at the wild card slots, you can see the Browns have a pretty good shot here now that they're 9-5, but we still have a number of teams at 8-6, including Houston and Buffalo, and then still at 7-7, Pittsburgh and Denver, and even the Chargers, who recently, of course, parted ways from Brandon Staley, are still technically alive, as well as the Las Vegas Raiders. So eliminated on the AFC side are the Titans, the Jets, and the Patriots, which definitely feels weird saying that the Patriots are eliminated from playoff contention. But still quite a bit to be figured out here in the last 3 weeks of the NFL season. Next, let's take a look here. Let's take a look here, and we have the Hatter's House chiming in with getting revenge against Green Bay for our last playoff loss. Thankfully, if we did play the Packers, if they somehow did climb their way into the playoffs here, because they are still alive at the 11th seed, if they did make it in, thankfully they would be traveling to Detroit. I think it is kind of important for the Lions to make sure that they either were traveling to a warm place or a dome, because Jared Goff's numbers are very when he's above 55 degrees, he's pretty good. When it's below 55 degrees, being a California boy, he struggles. So we want to keep him in either a controlled climate like a dome or in a warm weather, because that's where he plays his best football. So thankfully, if we did have to play the Packers in the playoffs, we definitely wouldn't have to make that trip to Lambeau in January/February, because that is not the environment you want to be putting Jared Goff out into. I agree here. The way the Rams are playing, the fact that we're seeing Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp and Demarcus Robinson too, they're seeing production from a lot of guys now. That Rams offense is looking pretty good. So I would appreciate avoiding Stafford and the Rams as well. But at least the nice thing there would be, they're the lower seed, so they would be traveling to us. But even if we had to travel there, again, it would be a nice dome. So in Los Angeles,
He's still got it.
He does. He's still got it going on. And it is a good point that he pointed out here, that if we were to lose to the Rams and Matt Stafford in the playoffs, it would certainly be something that I'm sure Lions fans would get especially being a Lions fan in the Los Angeles area. I am sure you would absolutely not hear the end of that. Of course, the Kings of the North update we talked about a little bit earlier. Of course, the Lions are still reigning from our frozen throne up here. We just need to either win or tie one of our 3 remaining games, and we will win our first division title since 1993 and our first NFC North title. So it looks like we'll be able to celebrate that this season. But for people who don't get to celebrate, let's do a quick update on our hot butts list here. Well, you may be celebrating depending on how you feel, but the newest coach to join the ranks of the fired is, of course, Brandon Staley. His time with the Los Angeles Chargers is done. Of course, he joins Frank Reich, who's been fired, and Josh McDaniels. It is kind of funny that the Raiders were the team to beat the Chargers and get Staley fired, with Josh McDaniels already sharing a similar fate on the season. And then, of course, we mentioned offensive coordinators Ken Dorsey and Matt Canada have also been let go this season. And then in terms of people who are still on that list, Matt Eberflus, the defense is playing well, but that offense is still not getting things figured out. So he's still definitely a guy in danger. Ron Rivera, I think it's pretty safe at this point to think that he won't be back next season, but we'll have to see how things go. Arthur Smith is doing his best to make sure that he gets canned. Dennis Allen, I forgot that this is actually Dennis Allen's second time as a head coach. I forgot that he had a rather forgettable stint with the Raiders where he did 2 full seasons, and then he went 0-4 to start his next season and was was let go. But depending on how things go for Dennis Allen, of course, if they end up being able to wrestle the title away from the Buccaneers, that would certainly help his case. Robert Saleh, again, is a new addition here just because he's definitely a name that's starting to pop up in the media. I think Brian Dabble has done enough to save himself, especially with what they were able to do with Tommy Cutlets. I think he was able to show that he's a good coach and that that roster just needs some attention. Mike Vrabel, he is actually one of the 2 coaches one of a couple of coaches on here that has a winning overall record with his organization. He's 55-43 with the Titans as their head coach. Of course, 5-9 this season. But they're in a weird spot, and it'll be interesting to see what they do this offseason. I don't think he's necessarily the hottest butt on the list, but there's definitely some embers underneath him. Sean McDermott, he's doing a lot to try and get himself off this list. They're now 8-6 this season, and of course he's 70-41 overall as the Bills head coach. So winning against Dallas was a big first step, but he could certainly get himself off this list quite easily if they make the playoffs. Bill Belichick, he is probably the greatest Patriots coach of all time, if not the greatest coach of all time. Of course, they're 3-11. But it does seem like his time with the organization is coming to an end, whether he leaves on his own accord or however that partnership ends. It seems like we're getting closer to that day. And last but not least, of course, is still Todd Bowles, who currently at 7-7 and holding the NFC South lead, probably will be safe if they can, in fact, make the playoffs. We'll have to see how it goes. And I like your style here, Hatter's House, with going to celebrate with a very expensive bottle of alcohol to open up after that final whistle on Sunday. A great way to celebrate that Lions division title and playoff berth. All right, gentlemen, we're reaching the end of the show here. Of course, we're going to take a look now and talk about this upcoming matchup against the Vikings. Again, the Lions at 10-4 are first place in the NFC North. They are favored to win this game according to BetMGM. They are 3.5-point favorites over the Vikings. The over/under, the total for this game is 47, and the money line is Detroit -175, Minnesota +145. This is going to be the 124th meeting between these two teams. They've played 123 times before now. The Vikings lead the all-time series with 80 wins compared to the Lions' 41 wins, and they've tied twice. That's pretty significant. They've doubled us up there in wins. So I know we often look at the Packers as being our biggest rival, but the Vikings have done us dirty quite a bit in our history. So it's definitely be nice to see us get some revenge here. And, of course, last season they split the series with both home teams getting the win. And then Minnesota, of course, is the reigning NFC North champions after they finished last season with a 13-3 record. Of course, that was when Kirk Cousins was healthy and under center, and that's no longer the case for Minnesota. Again, the Lions just need to win or tie one of their last three remaining games, and they'll get their first division title since they won the NFC Central back in 1993. The Vikings are currently the 6th seed in the playoffs, and in order for them to win the NFC North, because that still is a possibility, they would need to win all 3 of their remaining games, and Detroit would need to lose all 3 of their remaining games. So they can't do it without help from us. The Vikings have gone ahead and made a switch at QB. They will be starting veteran quarterback Nick Mullins in Sunday's game. Mullins went 26-33 for 303 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions in last week's loss to Cincinnati. And they will also be featuring second-year running back Ty Chandler. He had a 100-yard rushing performance last week. And had a pretty big run where he was looking really quick. And of course, I think one of the big stories in this game is the strength of the Lions being our rushing offense. We currently have the number 2 rushing offense in the NFL. We're going up against the Vikings defense, which is the number 5 rushing defense in the league. We're averaging 140.9 yards on the ground per game, and the Vikings defense is giving up 92 yards per game, gentlemen. So it'll be strength against strength in this one. As I mentioned earlier, too, the Vikings defense doesn't give up a lot of points. Jeffrey, what are your initial thoughts here about this matchup against the Vikings and the fact that we have to play them twice in the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, the playing them twice in the past 3 weeks, I'm not a big fan of that in general, that trend that the NFL is doing with that. I do get that it makes these end-of-season schedules a little bit more spicy, but I wish there was a little bit more variety, like, we'd play other division people towards the end. But, hey, it is what it is with this, and this is the first time we'll be seeing the Vikings this year, so I'm really curious to see how we do, because we're typically, we know each other well because we're division rivals. But we've not seen this version of them. They've had 3 quarterbacks since the start of the season. No, 4, because Jaron Hall started too.
Yeah, 4.
Since the start of the season. So to me, they're really a kind of a wild card here as far as our matchup against them. Their run defense has been good, and I'm curious to see kind of how our offensive line exerts their will upon them, and see if we can't still get Gibbs and Montgomery to be productive. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup, but I think we're going to win.
Oh, spoiler for your pick! I'm there going. We're going to be going with
spoiling things all night.
I know you just start calling you Tom Holland because you're leaking everything. Joe, what are your thoughts here about this matchup with the Vikings?
Yeah, Vikings. Nick Mullins, he's not proven. So I think Detroit's been proving all season. I think they have a chance to clinch the division. I think they will. Prediction for Detroit to win the football game.
Yeah, I think Nick Mullins is definitely obviously he first made his NFL debut with the 49ers, and he's not a guy that has established himself as being either a premier backup quarterback, or he's never really got. I mean, he got a little bit of a chance with the 49ers to be a starting quarterback, but one of the things that I find surprising about him is that I know his career stats. His career starting record isn't very good. I think he's 5-13 in games he started, but his stats are he's only behind Patrick Mahomes and Andrew Luck in terms of the number of yards that he's had through his career start. So he definitely is a guy that comes out and slings the ball. That hasn't necessarily translated to wins, as again he's 5-13 as a starter. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, because of course one of the weaknesses of the Lions throughout the season has been our pass defense. whether that be just the secondary themselves or the fact that we haven't been able to get a pass rush on the QB. So, a little concerned about that, but definitely feeling better about it after how well the Lions played against Denver. So now, gentlemen, as we come into our pick'em selection, Jeffrey is currently sitting at 10-4, of course, matching the Lions record, and is currently in first place. I fell to 9-5, enjoying Joe. You there at that mark. We're both now 9-5 after I went with the Broncos pick last week. Jeffrey already locking in the Lions this week. Who you got this week, Joe, with the Vikings and the Lions?
Detroit Lions.
Locking in the Lions. I am in that same boat. I was thinking I would love to know the uniform combination. They're not going to tell us that, but I was going back and forth with it because, like I said earlier, they did split last season where the home team did win their games last year, but after what happened against Denver, I'm with Edward here. Give me a refill of the Kool-Aid. I like the Lions in this one as well to get Minnesota. And I'm going to let the optimism take over and hope that we finish these last 3 games really strong and really set ourselves up for potentially being that team in the NFC that no team wants to run into. That'd be nice to get that reputation as we close out the season. And certainly, I think if we can follow that sort of blueprint that we had against Denver, where we were able to run the ball well, the rookies were contributing a lot through the passing game, and the defense and special teams did their part. I think it could be a very exciting start to 2024 for us as the Lions make the playoffs. So it's going to be weird. It's uncharted territory for us next year, gentlemen. Could see a playoff run from the Detroit Lions, which is not something that has happened in our lifetime. So could be pretty exciting stuff. All right, everyone.
It's a great time to be a Lions fan for sure.
And hopefully it's just the start of it, right? I don't necessarily think it's practical to expect to have a dynasty like the Patriots have had. But if this could be the start of a multi-year run where we're competing, certainly that would be super exciting. I think we'll talk a little bit about the directions of the different teams come the end of the year. But, I definitely think next year we should be favorites as well in the NFC North. So the fact that we're talking about potentially being relevant for multiple years is it's refreshing. It's nice to have a football team that plays meaningful games. All right, gentlemen. Well, I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Hatter's House 7110. Again, thanks for the follow and joining us on YouTube. Edward, of course, we always appreciate you chiming in throughout the show. And everybody else who's watching, again, we're coming at you live through YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. So whichever one of those channels is your favorite, make sure you find the Lions Grid profile. Give us a like and a follow, and you'll be able to stay up to date with all our latest episodes. Of course, for the regular season, we're coming to you live every Thursday at 6 p.m., and we'll have to figure out what our schedule will probably be a very similar schedule, but figure out what our schedule is going to look come time for the playoffs, because we are just 3 short weeks away from getting those underway. Actually, I think it might be 4 weeks until the playoffs actually start. But
the season's flying by.
Yeah, so it's exciting stuff. But thank you again, everybody. Jeff and Joe, as always, appreciate you joining me here today. And I think all that's left to do is say go Lions, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.